The average person thinks a zombie apocalypse means fighting the undead. Wrong. The first wave of death comes from your bathroom cabinet. Every prescription, every chronic condition, every daily medication becomes a ticking clock the second pharmacies close. And in America, that clock is sprinting towards zero for almost 70% of the population. Your medicine runs out. Here's something nobody talks about in zombie movies. You're not going to die from a zombie bite in the first week. You're going to die because you ran out of blood pressure medication. 68% of American adults take at least one prescription drug every single day. Over 2/3 of the country is medically dependent on a supply chain that collapses the second society does. 26% of adults take 4 or more medications daily. We're talking about 6.3 billion prescriptions filled every year. That's 19 prescriptions per person. This isn't optional. This is life support disguised as normal life. Start with insulin. 8.4 million Americans need it to stay alive. Without refrigeration, insulin degrades in 28 days. Above 86 degrees, it's useless even faster. Type 1 diabetics without insulin face diabetic ketoacidosis within days. That's a death sentence without emergency medical care. But insulin dependency is just the beginning. 47.7% of American adults have hypertension. Stop taking beta blockers suddenly and you're looking at rebound hypertension, chest pain, or a heart attack. 13.2% of adults take antidepressants. SSRI withdrawal starts within 1 to 3 days. Dizziness, severe anxiety, brain zaps. Benzos are worse. Stop cold turkey and you can seize. You can die. Even alcohol withdrawal kills. Delirium tremens has a 15% fatality rate without medical treatment. The pharmacies are empty. The hospitals are overrun. Your 90-day supply just became your countdown timer, but at least you can run from the zombies, right? Wrong. Your body quits. Medication dependency is one problem. The baseline American body is another, and the numbers are absolutely brutal. 40.3% of American adults are obese. That's a BMI over 30. Another 9.4% are severely obese with a BMI over 40. Only 24.2% of adults meet both aerobic and muscle-strengthening exercise guidelines. Nearly half the adult population meets neither guideline. 0 aerobic activity, 0 strength training. The average sedentary American male has a VO2 max around 35 to 40. That's not good fitness. That's barely functional. Here's where it gets real. Survival in a collapse scenario means constant physical labor, hauling water, chopping wood, running from threats, fortifying shelter. A gallon of water weighs 8.34 pounds. The survival minimum for a family of 4 means carrying 33 pounds each trip from your water source. Multiple trips per day. Over rough terrain, chopping firewood burns 400 to 500 calories per hour. You need sustained upper body strength and cardiovascular endurance that half the country simply does not have. And that's assuming you can even see the threat coming. 75% of American adults need corrective lenses. Contact lens wearers, that's 45 million people, face serious infection risk within days without proper cleaning solutions. Break your glasses and you're functionally blind. Another 26% of adults, roughly 61 million people, have some form of disability. But here's the kicker. Even if you're healthy, even if you're fit, you still need to eat. And here's something that's going to blow your mind about how fragile the American food system actually is. Most people think grocery stores have weeks of backup inventory in some warehouse. They think the trucks will keep coming even if things get bad. They think they'll have time to stock up. They're wrong on every single count, because the average grocery store has about 3 days of food. That's it, 3 days. And the trucks that restock those shelves, they stop rolling the second the crisis starts. The trucks stop. The American food system operates on a philosophy called just-in-time inventory. It's brilliant for efficiency. It's catastrophic for resilience. The average grocery store holds roughly 3 days of fresh food inventory. That's not a warehouse estimate. That's what's physically on the shelves. There is no backup. What you see is all that exists. And here's how that food gets there. Trucks transport 70 to 72% of all freight by weight in the United States. Over 90% of prepared foods move exclusively by truck. Kill the trucking network and the food supply doesn't gradually diminish. It stops. Immediately. Completely. COVID-19 proved how fast this happens even without infrastructure collapse. Toilet paper vanished within 24 to 72 hours of lockdown announcements. Meat processing shut down after nearly 5,000 COVID cases hit 115 facilities across 19 states. Out-of-stock rates for household paper products hit 21% nationally, and that was a disruption where trucks still ran, power stayed on, and stores restocked within days. In a true collapse, restocking never happens. The average American household has has less than 1 week of food on hand. Only 81% even meet FEMA's bare minimum recommendation of 3 days. FEMA actually recommends a 2-week supply. Almost nobody hits that target. Meanwhile, only 6% of Americans hunt in any given year. About 35% grow any food at home, mostly small hobby gardens averaging 350 square feet. Fewer than 1% live on farms. That number was 40% in 1900. Caloric demands in a high-activity survival scenario hit 3,000 to 4,000 calories daily for active males, roughly double what most pantries could sustain even short-term. And here's something else nobody thinks about. Refrigerated food spoils after 4 hours without power if you keep the doors closed. A full freezer lasts about 2 days. The clock starts the moment the grid dies. But at least you can drink water from the tap while you figure out your food situation, right? Wrong again, because the water system is about to become your next lethal problem. And most people have absolutely no idea how to fix it. The water stops. The average American uses 82 to 100 gallons of water per day. The survival minimum is half a gallon to 1 gallon. That's a dependency ratio approaching 100 to 1. Humans die without water in 3 to 4 days. In heat with high activity, life-threatening dehydration sets in within 24 to 48 hours. About 90% of Americans receive water from public municipal systems entirely dependent on electric pumps, chemical treatment, and continuous maintenance. During the 2003 Northeast blackout, 4 million customers of the Detroit water system were placed under boil water advisories for 4 days. Cleveland experienced sewage spills into waterways. After Hurricane Maria, half of Puerto Rico's sewage treatment plants were still non-functional a month later. Only 50% of the population had tap water 10 days after landfall. Here's the thing, only 58.6% of Americans had at least 3 gallons of water stored per person in their household as of 2017. Over 55% of households receiving food assistance didn't meet FEMA's 3-day water storage guideline. And storage is just the beginning of the problem. While 91% of Americans use some form of water filter, these are overwhelmingly Brita-style pitcher filters designed for taste. They're completely useless for purifying creek water contaminated with Giardia, cholera, or E. coli. The percentage of Americans who own true emergency purification equipment, UV purifiers, backcountry filters, purification tablets, likely sits in the single digits. Only about 750,000 Americans, under 0.3% of the population, hold amateur radio licenses. That's a rough proxy for the kind of person who maintains serious emergency preparedness equipment. Rural well owners, about 43 million people, have marginally more independence. But even private wells require electric pumps that fail immediately without power. So you can't drink the tap water. You don't have stored water. You don't have purification equipment. And you're looking at natural water sources thinking you'll just boil it. Great plan. Except you need fuel to boil water. You need containers that can withstand heat. You need to know how long to boil it. And you need to do this multiple times per day for your entire group without attracting attention. But wait, even if you solve the water problem, you still need to know what to do with it. And that's where the skills gap becomes absolutely catastrophic. You don't know anything. The erosion of practical survival skills across generations is quantifiable and severe. Fewer than 20% of Americans hold current CPR certification. Only 56% can perform all 5 basic swimming skills. An estimated 6.4% of the adult population are military veterans, the lowest percentage since before World War II. And most veterans served in support roles, not combat. Navigation without GPS is a vanishing skill. Paper map sales have collapsed. AA stopped printing maps in many regions. No rigorous survey tracks the ability to navigate by map and compass, but GPS dependency among younger adults is nearly universal. The ability to start a fire without matches or a lighter, identify edible wild plants, or construct basic shelter is confined to a small subpopulation of outdoor enthusiasts and survivalists. Likely well under 10 to 20% of the population, here's what physical labor actually looks like. A gallon of water weighs 8.34 pounds. Hauling the survival minimum for a family of 4 from a water source a quarter-mile away means carrying 33 pounds each trip, multiple times per day, over potentially rough terrain. Gathering sufficient firewood for heating and cooking demands sustained upper body strength and cardiovascular endurance that nearly half the adult population cannot maintain. 46.3% meet neither federal aerobic nor strength guidelines. And before you say you'll just grab a gun and figure it out, let me tell you about America's gun problem. Not the problem you think. The problem that even with 393 million civilian firearms in this country, almost nobody actually knows how to use them under pressure. 32% of adults personally own a gun. 42 to 44% of households contain one. But ownership is not proficiency. Here's the stat that should terrify you. NYPD officers who qualify regularly at the range achieve a hit rate of just 18% in gunfights where suspects return fire. At distances beyond 7 yards, accuracy drops to 23%. The Dallas Police Department found officers achieved complete inaccuracy, 0 hits, in nearly half of shooting encounters from 2003 to 2017. If trained officers perform this poorly, untrained civilians would perform catastrophically worse. And every gunshot broadcasts your position for a mile, a rifle for 2 miles. At night, those ranges double, but guns are the least of your problems. Because while you're worried about zombies and looters, your own brain is about to betray you in ways you cannot possibly prepare for. Your mind breaks. Psychological collapse is the fastest acting and most underestimated survival threat. Research on disaster behavior reveals that 70 to 80% of people exhibit normalcy bias. They freeze, deny danger, or underestimate threats. Only about 15% respond with decisive action. The brain requires 8 to 10 seconds to process novel information, even when calm. Extreme stress slows this further through tunnel vision, audio exclusion, and reduced motor control. PTSD rates among disaster survivors are staggering. After Hurricane Katrina, 30 to 49% of affected populations showed PTSD symptoms depending on the group studied. Among low-income parents, the rate reached 47.7%. 12 years later, 1 in 6 low-income mothers still had probable PTSD. After 9/11, survivors earning under $25,000 annually were 8 times more likely to develop PTSD than those earning over $100,000. But here's where it gets darker. Sleep deprivation compounds every vulnerability. After just 24 hours without sleep, amygdala reactivity increases over 60%. Moral judgment deteriorates. Risky decision-making spikes. After 36 hours, a young adult's cognitive performance drops to elderly levels. Chronic sleep restriction of 6 hours per night for 14 days produces impairment equivalent to 2 full days without sleep, and subjects are typically unaware of their decline. In a survival scenario demanding constant vigilance, this cognitive erosion would be relentless. The pre-disaster mental health baseline is already precarious. 57.8 million American adults, that's 19%, had a diagnosable mental illness in 2024. During COVID-19, anxiety and depression symptoms surged from 11% to approximately 40% of the adult population. A zombie apocalypse combining constant mortal threat, grief, displacement, and resource scarcity would push these numbers far higher while simultaneously eliminating all access to treatment, therapy, and psychiatric medication. And here's something nobody talks about. You're making an estimated 35,000 decisions daily in normal life. In survival mode, that number explodes. Every sound, every shadow, every person. Do you trust them? Do you run? Do you fight? Do you share resources? Decision fatigue causes progressively worse choices. More impulsive, more passive, less ethical. Your brain wasn't built for this. It was built for a world where threats are temporary and help is coming. Remove that assumption, and the psychological architecture collapses. But even if your mind holds together, even if you beat the odds and stay functional, you still have to deal with other people. And that's where the Hollywood version of the apocalypse and the reality start to diverge in very unexpected ways. Humans won't act like you think. Here's where I'm going to tell you something that contradicts every zombie movie you've ever seen. Disaster sociology research delivers a finding that nobody believes. Lawless behavior actually declines in most disaster situations. The National Research Council concluded in 2006 that expectations of mass looting and violence are based not on evidence, but rather on assumptions. After 9/11, New York City's homicide rate dropped 40 to 60% temporarily. The 2003 Northeast blackout, affecting 55 million people, produced minimal looting or violence. Natural disasters typically trigger increases in altruistic behavior and social solidarity. People help each other. They share resources. They cooperate. But wait, there's a critical caveat. Duration matters. Prosocial behavior dominates when people believe the crisis is temporary and help is coming. When deprivation extends beyond 3 to 5 days, when pre-existing inequality is severe, and when government response is visibly absent, the calculus changes. The 1977 New York City blackout saw looting begin within 10 minutes. 1,616 stores damaged, 1,037 fires, 3,776 arrests. But this occurred against a backdrop of near bankruptcy, depression-era unemployment in affected neighborhoods, and extreme socioeconomic distress. COVID-19 lockdowns produced an 8.1% increase in domestic violence nationally. That translates to approximately 1,000 1,330 additional domestic violence calls per day. The U.S. holds roughly 1.9 to 2 million incarcerated people, about 1 million gang members across 20,000 plus gangs. In a collapse scenario without functioning courts, police, or correction systems, these populations become uncontained variables. But the research suggests the greater danger isn't organized criminal behavior. It's the slow breakdown of trust and cooperation as resource scarcity persists over weeks and months. Here's the thing. The first week, maybe even the first 2 weeks, people band together, they help neighbors, they share food, they protect each other, but when the food runs out and stays out, when children are starving, when sick family members are dying without medicine, that pro-social behavior erodes. Not instantly, gradually, like watching ice melt. And that gradual erosion is more dangerous than sudden violence because you don't see it coming. The neighbor who shared supplies last week might be eyeing your stockpile this week. The group that welcomed you last month might view you as a resource drain this month. But even scarier than other humans is the structure you're trying to survive in. Because your house, the place you think will protect you, was never designed to keep anything out. It was designed to look good and pass inspection. And that's a fatal difference. Your house is kindling. 92 to 93% of new American homes are wood-framed. Hollow core doors can be breached with a single kick. Glass panels provide 10 seconds delay. Standard deadbolts can be defeated in 1 to 3 kicks. The average home has 6 to 8 entry points, each a vulnerability. A room with modern synthetic materials reaches full engulfment in 3 minutes. Compare that to 30 minutes 50 years ago. The evacuation window shrank from 8 minutes to 2. Without fire departments, a single cooking accident could destroy an entire neighborhood. 60% of housing is single-family detached. 16% live in apartments, which become vertical traps without elevators, water pumps, or sewage. Basements, offering defensive advantage, concentrate in the Northeast and Midwest. The South and West lack them. Before modern sanitation, waterborne disease was a leading killer. Typhoid killed at 33.7 per 100, 0.000 in late 1800s Chicago. Clean water introduction was responsible for 43% of mortality decline between 1900 and 1936. Removing sanitation doesn't return us to 1900. It returns us to something worse, because modern populations have no immunity. Even now, waterborne infections affect 7.15 million Americans annually, 120,000 hospitalizations, 6,600 deaths. Without treatment, cholera with 25 to 50% case fatality. Typhoid, dysentery, hepatitis A would spread explosively. Sepsis already kills 350,000 Americans annually in hospitals. Without hospitals, it becomes ubiquitous. A wound infection progresses to sepsis in days. Untreated pneumonia carries 30% mortality. Dental abscesses spread to bloodstream and kill within weeks without treatment. You're fighting cholera, typhoid, sepsis, and MRSA simultaneously. In a wood house with 6 entry points and 3 minutes to fire engulfment, the grid dies. The power grid is the keystone of every other system. Over 70% of U.S. transmission lines and transformers are more than 25 years old. The American Society of Civil Engineers grades energy infrastructure at C-. During the 2021 Texas winter storm, 40% of the grid's capacity went offline in just 4 hours. The state came within 4 minutes and 37 seconds of a complete grid collapse that would have taken weeks to restore. At least 246 people died, nearly 2/3 from hypothermia. That was a regional event lasting days with federal aid available. 42% of U.S. households heat with electricity. 87% have air conditioning. Remove the grid permanently, and temperature exposure becomes lethal at scale. Hypothermia can occur at temperatures as mild as 40 degrees Fahrenheit if you're wet or exhausted. At 60 degrees in water, frostbite begins on exposed skin within 30 minutes at wind chills of -27 Celsius. Heat kills even more efficiently. Heat-related deaths reached 2,415 in 2023, with 119,605 emergency room visits for heat illness. Untreated heat stroke is fatal in 65% of severe cases. Here's what nobody thinks about. Gasoline has a shelf life of 3 to 6 months, shorter with ethanol blends. Generators, owned by an estimated 12 to 15% of households, burn up to 20 gallons per day. Within months, every generator falls silent. Fuel pumps at gas stations require electricity to operate. After Hurricane Maria, only 65% of Puerto Rico's gas stations were functional 11 days post-storm, and that was with active federal relief efforts. But here's where it gets really bad. The grid isn't just electricity, it's communication. Cell towers have backup power lasting only hours to 1 to 2 days. After that, 97% of Americans who own cell phones lose their only communication method. Ham radio operators number only 750,000 nationwide. The communication blackout drives people to move, congregate, call out, all behaviors that compromise position in a threat environment. And without power, you're living in complete darkness. Zero light pollution means a single candle is visible from approximately 1.6 miles on a clear, dark night. Any illuminated window becomes a beacon, but you need light to function. You need heat to survive winter. You need to cook food. A portable generator produces 60 to 90 decibels. A distinctive mechanical drone audible up to a mile in quiet conditions. Chopping wood registers 60 to 80 decibels, carrying hundreds of yards. Cooking fires produce visible smoke for miles, and food odors that carry on wind for significant distances. Every survival necessity advertises your location. Every light, every sound, every smell. You cannot survive without these things. And you cannot use these things without drawing attention. So you're cold or you're hot. You're in the dark. You can't communicate. Your generator is about to run out of fuel forever. And every time you try to solve one problem, you create another that might get you killed. But at least you're working together with your group, right? At least you can trust the people around you to make smart decisions and stay organized. Groups fall apart. Robin Dunbar's research suggests humans maintain stable relationships with 150 people maximum. Effective task teams peak at 5. Groups over 80 need to split. For survival, groups of 25 to 50 balance labor division against coordination costs. Cooperation is the default in acute crises, but only when people perceive events as temporary. When crises extend weeks, when resource scarcity becomes existential, cooperation degrades. Decision fatigue compounds the problem. Cognitive depletion causes worse choices. Leadership emerges in only 15% of disaster-affected individuals. The remaining 85% freeze or panic, creating dependency on a small number of leaders whose own resources are depleting. And those leaders make life or death calls on 4 hours of sleep with mounting trauma. The free rider problem intensifies under scarcity. Individuals consuming resources without contributing. Trust networks built between strangers collapse faster than pre-existing relationships. In-group versus out-group hostility intensifies as threats increase. Week 1, everyone contributes. Week 2, someone does less, but eats the same. Week 3, accusations start. Week 4, the group fragments, or turns on weak links. Families fracture. Parents make impossible choices between children. Spouses blame each other. Adult children resent elderly parents. These are predictable responses to sustained stress. You need groups to survive. Division of labor, security, resource gathering require coordination, but groups are unstable under prolonged stress. You're trapped between fatal options. Stay isolated and die from lack of manpower. Join a group and risk betrayal or forced resource sharing that dooms everyone. Temperature kills first. Nature doesn't negotiate. Temperature exposure kills faster than starvation, dehydration, or zombies. Hypothermia occurs at 40 degrees if wet or exhausted. At 60 degrees in water, you don't need Arctic conditions. You need a rainy night and wet clothes you can't dry. Frostbite begins within 30 minutes at wind chills of -27 Celsius. That's normal winter across the northern US. Stage 1 hypothermia starts at 95 degrees. You shiver uncontrollably. Hands go numb. You can't perform fine motor tasks. Stage 2 hits at 90. Shivering stops. Confusion sets in. Speech slurs. You make catastrophically bad decisions. Stage 3. Below 82, you lose consciousness. Your heart becomes irregular. You die. The Texas storm killed 246 people, 2/3 from hypothermia, with the grid returning within days. In permanent collapse, the first freeze would kill millions across the Sunbelt where homes lack insulation and heating was always electricity dependent. Heat kills faster. 2,415 heat deaths in 2023. 119,605 ER visits. Untreated heat stroke is fatal in 65%. Core temperature hits 104, and organs fail. Brain damage begins. Without ice baths and IV fluids, death follows within hours. 42% of households heat with electricity. 87% have AC. Remove both and you've created temperature-dependent mortality that swings seasonally. Winter in Minnesota without heat. Summer in Arizona without AC. Both are death sentences for anyone who can't migrate, and migration means abandoning shelter and supplies. The average home loses 1 degree per hour in winter without heat. A 70-degree interior becomes 32 degrees in under 2 days. At 30 outside, your body burns through calories maintaining core temperature. You need 4,000 to 5,000 calories per day in extreme cold. You don't have that food. Your body cannibalizes itself. Muscle drops. Immune function collapses. Weather is a relentless attrition machine grinding down your reserves. Every cold night is a countdown. Every hot day is a race against organ failure. You can't fight it, hide from it, or negotiate with it. You give yourself yourself away. Operational security, military discipline of concealing position, capabilities, intentions, virtually unknown to civilians. Only 6.4% are veterans. Most never served in combat. Zero formal training exists for civilians. In practice, survivors would commit every conceivable noise and light discipline violation. A generator produces 60 to 90 decibels, audible a mile away. Chopping wood registers 60 to 80 decibels, carrying hundreds of yards. Cooking fires produce visible smoke for miles, and food odors that carry on wind. A single candle is visible from 1.6 miles. In a post-grid world with zero light pollution, any illuminated window becomes a beacon. 97% own a cell phone. When networks collapse, towers have backup lasting hours to 2 days. The population loses communication. Ham operators number only 750,000. The blackout drives people to move, congregate, call out, all behaviors that compromise position. You need firewood, you chop it. The sound carries. Someone hears, they know you have tools, they know you have shelter. You've advertised your position to everyone within earshot. You need light at night, you light a candle. That light is visible over a mile. People move toward it. They know where you are, you cook food, the smell carries hundreds of yards. People who haven't eaten in days smell meat. They know you have food. They're coming. Every survival necessity becomes a security compromise. You cannot survive without fire, light, noise, food preparation, and you cannot use these things without broadcasting your location. You're trapped where every action required for survival increases probability of violent confrontation. You're not trained for this. You've never operated in noise discipline environments. You've never moved tactically. You've never conducted perimeter security. You slam doors, you talk at normal volume, you use lights casually. These are decades of behavioral conditioning that cannot be unlearned in crisis. The data points toward a single insight. The average American is not an independent organism, but a node in an infrastructure network. Nodes do not survive network collapse. The 68% medication dependency, the 3-day grocery inventory, the 82-gallon water habit, the 93% wood frame housing, the sub-20% CPR certification, the 18% police hit rate. These aren't independent vulnerabilities. They're interconnected failure modes that cascade. Real disasters confirm the pattern. Puerto Rico lost power for 11 months with 2,975 excess deaths. Texas came within 4 minutes of grid collapse that would have dwarfed its 246 death toll by orders of magnitude. The Katrina Superdome held 26,000 people with supplies for 15,000 for 3 days, and the military couldn't distribute food for 4 days. The zombie apocalypse is fiction, but the vulnerabilities it exposes are not. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.